Hello my friends, happy Friday, Juma Mubarak. Hope you have all had amazing weeks. Welcome to the Aquilani History Podcast. We continue on our series on the history of the Kingdom of WARRI and the Niger Delta. First off, the usual shout outs. I'm wishing my oldest friend Dayo a very happy birthday. He's one of my biggest supporters. He's one of my best friends and a brother in every sense. He's literally the kindest and sweetest person I know, as well as the cleverest. Wishing you all the very best, baby boo. And thank you to my YouTube friends. Honoragene, your constant feedback means so much to me. Dr. Ahmed, thank you for your comments. It's really kind of you. And A2B, thanks for the love, joy, and support and smiles that you and the twins bring to me always. This is episode 5. So peace was restored to the kingdom and the region around the Benin River with the appointment of the governors of the river. Olomo and then his son after him, Nana, have eclipsed the achievements of their peers by some distance and have become extremely powerful, perhaps too powerful for the European powers who can smell the opportunity and wealth in the area and no longer will be satisfied with the current arrangement. Episode 5, The Red Rivers, Trade, Politics, War, and the Merchant Princes of the Niger Delta. Episode 5, titled Long Claws. Let's dive in. So the old money European chaps dragged the smaller firms to the court of equity that had been set up to settle trade disputes amongst Europeans and basically coerced them to sign a document involving the Shekiri traders as well, banning all trade at WARRI with heavy prices to be paid if anyone was caught trading outside the Benin River and any other old established points of trade. The British Navy also backed his decision because it would have been more difficult and expensive to patrol and protect any merchants traveling really deep into the hinterland. So in this business, as you can see, there's no permanent friend, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. The interest in the area was heavy. Like I just mentioned, some German firms were trying to penetrate into the hinterland. So it was quite obvious that the other European superpowers liked this nice savory aroma of money that was drifting in from the African continent and thought, that's nice, I'd like to have some. So the Germans and the French have been sniffing the Niger Delta area, trying to get a piece of the action themselves. In fact, over all of Africa, the so-called scramble was beginning. Everyone wanted a piece of the cake, and in different areas of Africa, it was different things. Here in Ishekiri land, it was palm oil. Elsewhere, it was rubber or gold or tin or diamonds or cocoa or timber. The list was endless. Africa is rich in natural resources. So to avoid unnecessary conflicts over foreign interests, Europe had recently had several large-scale wars over the preceding centuries. They had like the 7 Years' Wars, the Napoleonic Wars. They were tired of fighting. So they decided to establish a sharing formula for Africa. The war-weary European powers with interest in the African continent met to talk. 14 nations or empires, including Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Britain, Denmark, Spain, United States of America, Russia, Portugal, Austria-Hungary, Sweden, Norway, and the Ottoman Empire met in Berlin between 1884 and 1885 to delineate the rules for establishing spheres of influence and protectorates in Africa. No African country was represented. So basically, at the conference, different claims to different parts of Africa were made and ratified based on trade interests, concerns, and establishments. But no one could just claim anywhere though. They needed proof, they needed receipts, they needed to show evidence that they truly had enough influence and enough skin in the game in their interested areas to claim ownership. And of course, none of that nonsense about people already settled there and owning the land and having lived in said lands for millennia with deep cultural, linguistic, and spiritual ties to it. The real owners of the land, did not matter. So the great powers determined amongst one another that no European nation could claim ownership or protection over any African territory without having a real presence and control there. That is to say, the land must be effectively occupied. This meant that they must have evidence of trade agreements or treaties or protections with the native kingdoms, and should ideally have an administrative setup on ground like a consulate or a residency office to govern the area, and if necessary, to take it over by force. So the consul for the Bights of Benin and Biafra, Consul Hewitt, had been on a massive tour of the entire region starting from 1884, signing treaties left, right and center with the local rulers from Calabar and Bonny to Brass and WARRI. These agreements of protection or treaties were then served as evidence at the ongoing Berlin Conference to show that British interests were firmly established in the region, and so other European nations should stay clear, especially the French. Because I mean, if you upset the French, then that was just extra points for banter. A side but important note is that also since 1879, there was a cluster, a conglomerate of private firms much higher up in the country, or much higher up the Niger. They had joined ranks and bought out competition or just outrightly crushed all competition. These companies will eventually coalesce and become the Royal Niger Company. They will be granted a royal charter, essentially becoming a private company but governing that area for profit on behalf of Great Britain. And they too were buying and treating their way all across the north and gradually heading down south towards where WARRI is located. Now, these treaties were very dubious things, and they were traps that could be sprung to claim sovereignty over anyone who signed them. The famous colonialist Lord Lugard said they were utter frauds, and no man, if he knew what they meant, would sign them. On the surface, they offered friendship and protection to African kingdoms, but they basically take over all of their foreign policy decision-making by making it compulsory to confer with Britain before speaking with any other country, like some toxic spouse, like, yeah, you're not allowed to have any other friends. There also would be a clause on free trade, which if signed, opens up the hinterland like never before. Like, my land is my land, but his land is our land kind of scenario. So one of Nana's earliest tasks as governor of the river was to negotiate and eventually sign one of such treaties with the British Empire. So he cleverly negotiated out two articles in the treaty, Articles 6 and 7, which concerned free trade and religion. He basically decided not to agree for everybody. So these clauses were left out in the treaty that he signed in 1888. I'm going to highlight and summarize the articles of the treaty so you have an idea of what exactly they look like. So Article 1, which I describe as like an intro and summary, basically goes, Her Majesty, the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland, Empress of India, in compliance with the requests of the chiefs and people of the Benin River and the Ishekiri country, hereby undertakes to extend to them and to the territory under their authority and jurisdiction her gracious favour and protection. Article 2 was foreign policy. Article 2 states the chiefs of the Benin River and the Ishekiri country agree and promise to refrain from entering into any correspondence, agreement or treaty with any foreign nation or power except with the knowledge and sanction of Her Britannic Majesty's government. Like, okay. So basically, they were essentially saying all your foreign policy correspondence goes through us. Article 3, which I have titled Special Status for Expats. It states it's agreed that full and exclusive jurisdiction, civil or criminal, over British subjects and their property on the Benin River and Ishekiri country is reserved to Her Majesty to be exercised by consular or other officials as Her Majesty shall appoint for that purpose. Article 4 bothered me more on home affairs. So basically it says all disputes between the chiefs of the Benin River and the Ishekiri country, or between them and the British or foreign traders, or between chiefs and neighboring tribes, which cannot be settled amicably between two parties, shall be submitted to the British consular or other officers appointed by Her Majesty for arbitration and decision or arrangement. Okay. Article 5 is a very interesting one, which I have described as also about home affairs. It basically covers every single possible contingency. So it says, the chiefs of the Benin River and the Ishekiri country hereby engage to assist the British consular or other officers in the execution of such duties as may be assigned to them, and further to act upon their advice in matters relating to the administration of justice, the development of resources of the country, the interest of commerce, or in any other matter in relation to peace, order, and good government, and the general progress of civilization. Like, this is deliberately and dangerously vague. Firstly, as a sovereign nation, having to act upon the advice of a foreign government is a bit wild. I mean, you have to. That's what they're signing. It's restrictive and intrusive AF. And then there's the part that says, in any other matter relating to, and then goes on to describe loosely every possible scenario in the universe, like it describes, that you have to listen to them in matters relating to justice, resources, commerce, or any other matter relating to peace, order, good governance, and the general progress of civilization. Like what does that even mean? Article 6 relates to free trade. It states the subjects and citizens of all countries may freely carry on trade in every part of the territories of the chiefs, and they may have houses and factories therein. So basically just open your borders, open your doors, open your markets, we'll build wherever we want and put factories wherever we want. So this was one of the articles that Nana struck off and refused to sign. Article 7 was on religion. Basically, it gave all Christian ministers permission to reside and preach, and that the chiefs had to give them full protection. But it also says that all forms of religious worship and religious ordinances may be exercised freely within the protectorate. Article 8 was about like emergency response, that if any vessel should be wrecked within the Benin River or Shekiri territories, the chiefs will give them all assistance within their power. Okay. Basically, Nana did not agree to signing Article 6 on free trade and Article 7 on freedom of movement of religious priests. Anyways, they did sign without provisions of Article 6 and 7. So looking at the relationship between Europeans and the Africans, what had started out as contact and then illegitimate trade and then legitimate trade and then trade with Europeans needing protection from African chiefs had then morphed into the Europeans needing consular or like an ambassadorial representation. And now roles had reversed, with Europeans being the ones offering protection. I mean, it's only reasonable to assume now that the next steps logically would be to establish a protectorate and then direct imperial control in the form of a colony. And more so because other European powers were showing interest in the same regions. And if the British Empire did not take formal possession, they would most likely end up being outmaneuvered by other superpowers. I mean, this happened in neighboring Cameroon with the Germans. So on the 5th of June, 1885, the British government announced in the London Gazette that the territories in the Niger districts were placed under the protection of Her Majesty the Queen by virtue of certain treaties concluded over the previous year and by other lawful means. It said this notification did not purport to make any new claims, but merely to confirm an already existing situation. However, this protectorate, as announced in the Gazette, was just simply a paper protectorate at this time. Some of the articles of the treaties had been rejected by leaders like Nana and Jaja of Okpobo, like the free trade clauses. This was a no-no for the British, and they would seek to change this at any cost. They needed full-on and effective control. This was not possible if Nana and Ishekiri land still held the keys to their own house. Britain did not want the guest room or primary suite in someone else's house. They wanted the whole house. It's a bit like you living in your parents' house and then chucking them out when you turn 18. So this would mark the beginning of a period of forceful removal of African leaders. I'm sure you must now be wondering how Nana would negotiate this new climate of the protectorate and how he would protect the monopoly that he and his fathers before him had built up over the decades, which the British foreign and colonial forces were just as keen to break. If Nana needed any confirmations as to the true intentions of the British now, he needed to look no further than his neighbor, King Jaja of Okpobo, the first of the African leaders in the Niger Delta to be removed. King Jaja was a self-made former slave in Bonny, who rose to be king of Okpobo, and he, like Nana, also had an ironclad monopoly in his kingdom. He had acted on the rights of the treaty he signed with the British in 1837, barring traders' access to his inland markets. He'd also struck off Article 6 in the new 1884 Hewitt Protection Treaty. So this led to a lot of friction, and several disputes arose when Jaja barred European traders from accessing markets in his sphere of influence, as provided by the special conditions of his treaty. So he was getting a lot of grief and he was getting threats of war. And therefore he petitioned the British Foreign Office, and this is what they had to say. So they said that Jaja appeared to be the de facto suzerain of the contested areas and that it was perfectly within his power to prohibit European trade. He saw no infringements of the Treaty of 1837 which would justify intervention. There was no cause for war against Jaja, according to any sort of rules of international right. So in 1887, whilst further investigations were going on, the vice consul in that region called Johnston was going up the river to open some new markets in Jaja's area of influence. So he was blocked by Jaja's people. So concerned about the trend, he sent a telegram to London asking for permission to deport Jaja. 10 minutes before his telegram arrived in London, he received a telegram stating that his action regarding Jaja has been approved. But this was referring to a previous message he had sent. But he acted like it was a response to the message that he just sent. Of course he knew, but he felt like he had what he needed to achieve what he wanted to do. He then invited Jaja, that's Consul Johnston, invited Jaja for a meeting aboard a British ship, promising him safety. But when Jaja attended, he was arrested and told if he offered any resistance, it would be mercilessly crushed. Jaja was on the way to Accra within the hour. It's given Lannisters send their regards. Jaja was put on a show trial. I mean, the verdict was already known. I mean, when you have the judge saying things like, "I found it quite impossible to take minutes, as is usual at a court of inquiry, the vernacular of the natives being so peculiar," I mean, it's like a foregone conclusion. So Jaja's sentence was upheld and he was exiled. However, the debacle with the telegrams was spotted by the Foreign Office lawyers, and it proves that the Vice Consul had detained and removed Jaja on a misapprehension that he had the authority to do so. He didn't, so the deportation was very illegal. When Jaja's health began to deteriorate, the Foreign Secretary was worried that if he died in exile, and I quote, "it would be a very extreme embarrassment. It would induce a closer inquiry into the circumstances of his deportation, which cannot be defended according to European notions of good faith." So the Foreign Office started to make arrangements to move him back home. They moved him to Barbados, but his health continued to decline, and he was then moved to Tenerife to await transport back to Okpobo, but he died on the island and never made it back home. So thus the first of the Niger Delta kings to go was Jaja. He was a victim of the British system, of this ambiguous purgatory of the protectorate system, where the intent is to make sovereigns become subjects, but without any legal backing to do so. Now, Nana and all these Shekiri chiefs must have been following the events that happened to Jaja extremely carefully and with very much warranted apprehension. Well, that's episode 5, the penultimate episode, and it's clear the dynamic is changing. I can't wait to see you next week for the finale, and it will be epic. So, quick correction. When I mentioned the treaty that Jaja signed with the British government, I said twice 1837. The actual date is 1873, so I apologize for that. He signed the initial treaties excluding the free trade articles in 1873, and then he started to run into trouble from about like 1888 thereabouts. So yeah, quick correction, sorry about that. What a journey it's been so far. Thank you for sticking with me and for keeping me company. Thank you for your support, for listening from all over the world. Please, if you haven't already, kindly follow the podcast and give it a rating and a quick vote on the poll after the episode ends as well. I'm trying to grow my audience base, so if you could please recommend and share the podcast with like-minded listeners, it would really go a long way in helping the growth of this podcast. Please and thank you. I hope you have a fantastic week ahead, and if you'll be fasting next week, wishing you Ramadan Kareem. Stay beautiful, stay strong, stay glowing and amazing. Speak soon.